What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus, that's Mason, and we are ready to break down all the awesome matchups that we've got in week two. Been a bunch of talk about how there's not going to be good games in week two, how it's going to be a sleepy week. You might as well just don't even worry about it. Just go do whatever you want to do at the fall festival or whatnot. I disagree, man. We got some really, really good matchups that we're going to talk about here for week two. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Kansas at Missouri, Michigan at Oklahoma are some of the big matchups. Mason, how you doing this morning? We don't usually go live in the morning time, but we're running a little bit late this week, and we're just doing the best we can, aren't we?
That's right. Yeah, we get in where we can. It's like working out, It's all about fitting your schedule and showing
Now
up.
you're speaking my language, because that's
Yeah.
pretty much how that works for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
I
But ready to talk about week two. I mean, like you said, some people think this is a sleepy week and one that you can just skip and, go to a wedding or something like that. And I'm telling you, skip the wedding, watch some college football because all last year when we had these weeks, and I think week two in particular last year was one of those weeks where we thought it was kind of sleepy and not as good of matchups. And it ended up being one of the best weeks. So I think that there will be some upsets this week and some really good games to watch. Ready to break it down with you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what people are talking about is some of the games, that are 30-point favorites, and some of the big boys, but it's non-con rivalries, I think, that are what makes this really, really interesting this week. Let's jump into our first non-con rivalry of the week. This one is going to be on at noon. It's Iowa at Iowa State. It's for the Cyhawk Trophy. It's the 72nd meeting between these two teams. Um, First meeting between these guys was in 1894. So this game has been played before, right? And Iowa leads the series 47-24. But the most interesting part about this rivalry and what kind of gives it its lore in recent years is the close games. Honestly, I mean, looking back from 2019 to the present year, the final scores were 18 to 17, 27 to 17, 10 to 7, 20 to 13, 20 to 19. So are you detecting a trend there, Mason? These games are typically very low scoring, and beyond all of that, this is a huge, huge rivalry in the state of Iowa. I mean, I've been reading all the comments on all the other videos from different networks and things like that, and this is a bitter rivalry, and the series is split 2-2 in the last four. Iowa State has been kind of on the rise, I guess, over the last couple of years. Um, you know, Matt Campbell at one time was one of the most sought after head coaches in all of college football. Every time there was a job opening, right? And he says, "Nah, I'm staying here. No, I'm staying here." Well, there was a couple of years there where it was like, "What is this guy doing? What is he waiting on?" Well, lo and behold, Iowa State goes 11-3 last year. They compete for the Big 12 championship. A lot of people consider them to be a competitor in the Big 12 again this year, and they're off to a good start, a 2-0 start, getting that big win against Kansas State there week one, or I guess that was technically week zero as we call it. Um, I'll get down to the nitty gritty here, man, and what I'm looking at in this game, and I'll kind of try to dress out how I'm looking at these teams so early in the season. Look, we have a limited sample size on obviously both teams, but um, I was gonna. So far they have leaned on running the football. Okay, I was chuckling before we started this because I was pulling up some stats, for each team just to kind of have them on my screen here, and it's funny you compare Rocco Becht to Gronowski, the new quarterback for Iowa this year. Gronowski has 44 passing yards this season compared to Rocco Becht's 461. And it looks
Mhm.
funny on paper whenever you look at them side by side, but there's some thoughts I've heard the talking heads. There's some thoughts that maybe Iowa was kind of sandbagging, if you will, hiding, some of their offense. Mason, Iowa hasn't had a great offense in a long time. It was better last year than it has been in years past, but you know, I'm not thinking that there's going to be some kind of an offensive explosion in this game. So with the total being set at 41.5, I think the under is still the play here. I don't. If you're going to play the over or under, how could you play anything else after looking at the offense for Iowa here? But what really makes me lean towards the under, Mason, is the fact that looking at Iowa State's defense so far this year, they've been susceptible to the pass. They really haven't been susceptible to the run. Now, have they pressured the quarterback? No. But have they stopped the run? Yes. For the most part, they have done that. They were pretty good at doing that against Kansas State. Um, and that just leans right into the strength of Iowa's offense, which is running the football. So again, I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think the fact that Iowa State is so sturdy against the run, I think is going to really hold Iowa in check. It'll all depend on the RPO game for the Iowa Hawkeyes in this one. Are they going to get favorable looks on the outside with their wide receivers? Hell yes, they are, because Iowa State is going to load the box, right? They're absolutely going to load the box, sell out on the run. You're going to get one-on-ones on the sides. Can somebody hit an over-the-top play for Iowa? I mean, that's what this is going to boil down to. Who can you hit an explosive play? Um, I'm going to say that they probably can at some point in the game, but not over and over in this one. What are your thoughts here? That's kind of where my head's tracking on this one. I think another low scoring game in this one for sure. Vegas agrees with that. And with the very large weapons that Ohio or that Iowa State has on offense, and with the way they're set up on defense, I can see why they're the 3.5 point favorite as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, looking at this game and this matchup, obviously we know a little bit more about Iowa State, having the game against Kansas State, earlier in the year, or in week 0, I should say. I think that may be why Iowa State's favored here. I don't know if the right team's favored here though, Mark. I know Iowa State's playing at home, but looking at Iowa, I feel like Vegas hasn't caught up to Gronowski. He comes over from South Dakota State, has some hype around him, but I don't know if most college football fans in general are really paying attention to Gronowski, transferred over to Iowa. But I think it was a big deal. And depending on his health, I know he did go out in the Albany game. I think that was mostly precautionary from what it sounds like. I know he's playing, but we'll just have to see if he's 100% or not. But he's kind of a big dude. On the broadcast, watching this game back, one of the commentators said that he looked like Tebow out there running the football. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but I did see some dudes bouncing off of him, which is, I mean, for a quarterback, that says a lot. So I think getting his legs involved here is going to be key. I haven't really liked Iowa State and their ability to stop the run. But on top of that, I do think that when Iowa State loads the box, they're going to have a game plan to stop the run. You have to do that against Iowa. That's going to be their number one goal, is to stop the run, stop Gronowski from running. And now we get to see Gronowski throw the football, because he didn't have to do that against Albany. The game plan was very vanilla. They didn't give anything up. Now let's see what they can do as far as passing the football. Kansas State wasn't able to take advantage of Iowa State's pass defense, and maybe they're really good. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm anxious to see what Iowa has in the passing attack. Looking at what Iowa's done in the past, they haven't been able to pass the football very well, very effectively. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to change or not. I'm anxious to see if Sam Phillips gets involved, the transfer coming over at wide receiver at the X position. But looking at the Iowa State side of things, Rocco Becht is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, potentially in college football. I think he's slept on across the league. And I'm anxious to see who steps up at that receiver position for Iowa State. Going up against Iowa, it's a staunch defense. They're known for being a defense first team. And what I saw last week against Albany was one drive that Albany had where they were able to drive the football. Quarterback was making plays. He was throwing some darts, throwing it to where just his receiver can get it. Saw a lot of sliding catches and things like that. So I'm wondering if Iowa may be susceptible in the passing game this year, and maybe that's an area that Rocco Becht and Iowa State is going to be able to capitalize on. We'll have to wait and see. I still want to see a receiver step up for Iowa State. I don't know who that go-to guy is for the Cyclones, but if they're able to find it in this one, I could see Iowa State coming away with a win here with an offense that is strong enough to get over the hump. If it works out that way, I think that the over is hitting. I think it's going to be more like a 27-20 type of game because I do have confidence in the run game for Iowa getting going and potentially Gronowski finding something in the passing game as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard some talks about how, the defense for Iowa State has been actually, quote, leaky, is what I've heard. But I mean, it's been leaky through the air. I mean, when Kansas State, the majority of their yards came through the air. They weren't on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, 273 yards through the air in that game. And if you really actually take out the just two explosive runs by Jace Brown from Kansas State, you're talking about they averaged like 4 yards a carry, 3 point something, 8 yards a carry, something like that. So I feel pretty good about them being able to jam up the run, and that's why I say I think it's gonna come down to somebody for Iowa either making a play or Iowa State's winning this ball game because I just don't see. I mean, Iowa State's thrown the ball all around the yard, so far this year. And they got the guy to do it. Rocco Becht is solid, obviously. I like Iowa State here. They've just been too good. This program is on an upward trajectory right now, and Iowa is not. Iowa's not on any kind of upward trajectory right now. And the day I start betting on Iowa and their explosive offense
Right.
is the day that I need to stop betting. So I'm going Iowa State here, and I'm taking them -3.5. I think they win this thing. I think they might win this thing 10-3 or something, dude. I mean, that could very, very well happen.
Yeah, this to me is a stay away game from a betting perspective. I don't really like favoring the away team in a rivalry. I do think that Iowa could potentially be the better team here when it's all said and done, but we haven't seen enough out of them. I mean, and I think that that's as from a betting perspective or just from a college football fandom perspective, we've seen more of Iowa State. We saw them in week 0, beat Kansas State in a pretty close matchup. And so I think I kind of want to favor them because of that, because I just know more about them. But that doesn't, the unknown from Iowa is also appealing. And so to me, I do think that Iowa comes away with a win here, but I'm not confident enough to bet it. I'll be anxious to see what the takeaway is from this game for both of these teams because I still have some uncertainties for both teams here.
Yeah. Iowa State. I think one thing that you could really look at in this game, if they really wanted to seal this victory here, is you got to get after the quarterback a little bit whenever they do decide to throw the ball. They're not going to throw the ball 30, 40 times. You're not going to have a ton of chances. And Iowa State has been really bad at getting after the quarterback this season. They have 1 sack on defense for the season so far. So I think that's also an X factor. Iowa State has got to figure out how to fabricate some pressure whenever Iowa does decide to try to drop back and throw the football. We'll see how that works out. All right, let's move on to one of our other games. And Glenn said, get to Oklahoma and Michigan before I meet Lou for breakfast. Good morning. Good morning. Well, let's just do that then. What's wrong with that? Why not just go ahead and jump over to uh, Michigan going on the road to Oklahoma? It's a Big Ten versus SEC matchup, and it's in prime time, 7:30 p.m. It's going to be on ABC. Oklahoma is currently favored by, I see 6.5 now, so I guess that ticked up to 6.5. I had seen 5.5 just earlier this morning. I'm sure you could probably find both out there on the internet. Over under set at 45.5. It's John Mateer time in Norman, Oklahoma. And College Game Day is going to be there for this one. This is going to be an absolutely huge game. Um, People are going to be getting ramped up all day long for this one. The stadium is going to be absolutely electric. The cannons are going to be popping off. It's going to be a good one, man. Really, really excited for this one. I don't know when the last time game day was in Oklahoma. Um, I don't know if it's been over the last couple of years because it's been a couple of rocky years for Oklahoma, specifically on offense, Mason. And I think that this is a completely revamped offense if you compare it to what we've seen last year and especially a couple of years ago. Um, Last year, this team was just snake bitten with injuries along not only the offensive line, but at the wide receiver position. And this team had no explosiveness. They couldn't get out of their own way, frankly, on offense. This seems like one of the quickest 180 turns, this early in the season now. We haven't seen, Oklahoma be tested at this point, obviously, but for all intents and purposes, the offense looks really good so far. The offensive line looks good. Quarterback play has looked good. John Mateer obviously has tore it up. He's been in Heisman conversations already, right? And this will be a big Heisman moment for him if he can perform well. But something I wasn't able to say last year, the wide receivers look good as well. The wide receivers have looked good so far. Dion Burke looks nice and healthy. That dude's an absolute animal. So you've got a go-to receiver, a legitimate 1A receiver on this team. That's something I always look for, especially whenever you've got a quarterback like a Mateer. Do you have that go-to guy? And I can legitimately say yes for Oklahoma, and that's absolutely huge. Um, Speaking of the offense, one area that seems lacking to me so far this season, and just kind of looking at the depth chart, is running back. And that's something that I think is going to be really important in this game. Michigan's known for being pretty stout on defense, right? They've been pretty stout the last couple of years. And while they lost a lot of players from last year's team and the national championship team the year before that, I still think they're pretty solid on defense. I still think they're, decently solid. I don't see a lot of teams going and scoring 30 and 40 points on Michigan on a normal basis this season, right? So I think Oklahoma's got to figure out a way to show some balance on offense, and the running back room is a little bit concerning to me. So if they can run the football in this one, I think that really goes a long way in covering this 6.5 point spread for Oklahoma because the defense is going to be sick, man. I mean, R. Mason Thomas, Kit Lewis, Peyton Boeing, they're all back. I mean, those are guys at every level of the defense, and that's not the only guys that are back, but those are just some of the biggest names. But there's other dudes on that defense, legitimate dudes, and we all know this head coach's background, right? I was listening to something earlier this week about this game, and um, Bryce Underwood is a freshman quarterback, really just getting his feet wet over at Michigan. There's only been one freshman quarterback ever to go against um, to go against one of his defenses and score better than 65 a PFF grade ever. And that's a lot of years now. I mean, he was a defensive
Yeah.
coordinator for a long time. He's really, really good at throwing stuff at these quarterbacks and mixing up coverages, giving them pre-snap looks that are different than post-snap looks. And I'm concerned. I'm always concerned when there's a freshman involved in such a big matchup on the road, right? Um, So transitioning over to Michigan, we're talking about Bryce Underwood. That's an era that's just beginning, right? And I think Bryce Underwood's going to be a good quarterback. He's got zip. He's got everything that you want. He's athletic. He's got the zip, the arm, everything. That's great. Confidence. He looks very confident. He seems to be anticipating throws. So all that stuff is checking out. He's not mature enough to layer the football yet. It doesn't really seem like he seems like a lot of these young guys. They want to just throw it as hard as they can. And so I think Bryce Underwood is still trying to figure out stuff like that. That is very common with young quarterbacks. So interested to see how he reacts to what is going to be one of the best defenses that he's going to face this year. Right up there, I would consider with Ohio State and some of these defensive juggernauts this season. Um, it's all going to depend on if Michigan is able to run the rock, honestly, because I don't see the playmakers at wide receiver right now for Michigan. Um, you got a couple playmakers at tight end. You got a couple, one or two playmakers at wide receiver. I just don't see a ton of go-to guys in the receiving core that is just going to make Bryce Underwood comfortable enough to go out there and perform for 60 minutes on the road, prime time, freshman year. It just seems like there's too many things stacked against the Michigan Wolverines in this one, in my opinion, man. Um, Justice Haynes is going to have a really, really big day for the Wolverines if Michigan is looking to play upset here. What are your thoughts? I like Oklahoma in this one to win. We'll talk more about the spread here in a minute at 6.5. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think this Oklahoma defense is absolutely legit, potentially the best in the SEC.
Yeah.
And particularly, I like the defensive line on the interior. I think getting Dominic Williams back for a second year was a pleasant surprise for OU. This was a guy who came over from TCU, was supposed to be kind of a one and done sort of deal. You get an extra year out of him, and I think that that's huge when you got a guy, a really talented sophomore like David Stone playing behind him, rotating in. I don't even know if you can necessarily say he's playing behind him. But having that in the middle of the defense is huge. You bring in Marvin Jones Jr. At the defensive end position, wondering if he's going to get going. Um, I I know he was a highly touted guy coming out. Went to Georgia, transferred to FSU, didn't do a ton there. Now he ends up at Oklahoma. Let's see what kind of production he can have. But Kip Lewis at linebacker. You do lose a pretty good bit on the back end of the defense from last year, but I think they're going to be solid up front. I know they're going to be solid up front. Just kind of wanting to see if the secondary is going to catch up by the end of the year. Now in week 2, you've got a freshman quarterback coming in, and he's going to be asked to challenge the secondary. Is he going to be able to do that? That's kind of my question with Bryce Underwood and Michigan here. I do like some of the receivers that they have at the playmaker position. Samaj Morgan is a young guy that I'm still waiting to kind of go off, but very talented junior there. And and then you got the transfer coming in, McCauley. Is he going to get involved in this? The tight ends are always going to be big for Michigan. I think that Michigan under Bryce Underwood has not figured out an identity yet. I don't think that they figure it out in week 2. This is a really tough environment to come and play in. To say that Michigan's got to come in, and this is probably about the only way that they win. And you alluded to this earlier. Michigan has to come in and run the football against Oklahoma, right? At Oklahoma. I just mentioned that the highlight of their team is the interior of their defensive line. It's going to be really tough to run against this Sooner defense. And that's why I just don't have a ton of confidence here. Bryce Underwood it's trial by fire. Week 2, let's go to Norman and one of the best environments in college football and try to come out of here with a dub. It's just going to be really tough. I don't see it happening here. If Bryce Underwood does come out and light it up and throw for 300 yards, hey, maybe he's that guy. But I'm gonna have to see it first before I put my money on Michigan here. Um, Getting over to Oklahoma's offense, I kind of just talked about the Michigan offense versus Oklahoma's defense because I do think that that's kind of the matchup to watch. But like you said, John Mateer is having, or had an excellent week one. He's very highly touted. I think rightfully so. He looks like he's got a lot of zip on the ball. Kind of knows where he wants to go with the football. But outside of Deion Burks, who's going to step up at the playmaker position? Do we get some tight ends involved in this one? Still waiting to see. We didn't see Jaden Ott in week one, so he's going to
Mm-hmm.
come in and be able to run the football probably. But again, kind of like Oklahoma, running against Michigan traditionally has been really tough to do. So that's Oklahoma. Even though they've got John Mateer at quarterback, I'm pretty confident in saying that they want to run the football first. Knowing you got a defensive head coach, you typically run first, pass second. Is this going to be a little bit more of John Mateer trying to push the football down the field? If so, does that leave an opportunity for Michigan to slip in with an interception, turnover? Those are things that you definitely want to look out for. And then looking at the offensive line for Oklahoma, sure they played better in week one, but I'm not convinced that this offensive line has been fixed. And to me, that's a matchup I'm going to be looking at to see. Okay, I know that they addressed the issue, but the way that they addressed it, did it actually fix the offensive line? Because that was the biggest issue last season by far. And I'm not really sure that they did enough to address that to become a championship contender, which really to me, the offensive line is kind of that catalyst for OU, just based on what we saw last year. Haven't seen enough this year to say for sure that they're not going to get it together, but that's an area that I'll be highlighting for sure. If you can't tell, I'm taking OU in this game. I think that they're going to win it. I like them at home in this situation. 6.5 is a little bit steep. I thought this would be more like a 3.5, 4 type of spread, but given that it's under 7, I think if you made me choose, I would take Oklahoma at -6.5. Also like the under here. I think freshman quarterback coming in, going up against a really good defense. He's probably going to struggle. And then I think an average to below average day from the Oklahoma offense going up against a tough defense for Michigan is probably likely here. I think this could end up being like a 23, 24-17 type of game, something like that. So give me Oklahoma to cover here. Give me the under. Not rushing to bet this one. We'll have a betting show coming out later on this week, but this is one. This is one I definitely am interested to watch. I don't know if I'm ready to bet on either of these teams yet.
Yeah. Well, look, Wink Martindale has got to figure out a way to muck this game up if
Mhm.
Michigan's going to have a chance to be in this thing, honestly. Because I think there's two avenues that this game can go. Michigan mucks it up with their defense, and this thing's ultra low scoring, and I think that's more likely to be what's going to happen, especially Vegas tends to agree. And I like your underplay because I'm predicting this one. I think Oklahoma wins the game. Okay, I think they win 20-17 or something, very close to that. I think it's going to be very low scoring. Um, but I want to hear from the Oklahoma fans, where is Jaden Ott? Because you know what? I've heard multiple different things, and I want to hear from you guys. I want y'all to tell me what's going on because I've heard multiple different things, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe he's just third on the depth chart. I'm trying to figure this out. But I mean, he had 1,315 yards back in 2023. This is a guy that's got some experience. Didn't do that in 24 due to some injuries and stuff. Sitting out. But I'm interested to see. Do they let him out of the gate? It really did seem like Oklahoma kept it pretty plain Jane during that first game. So we'll see which version of them we get, but. I heard one little tidbit of information about John Mateer, and I'm interested to see if it comes to fruition in this game. But Wink Martindale is a just known madman blitzer. He blitzes about 43% of the time. Okay. And when you start getting over 40%, that's high. And there's some games he goes 50 and 60%. He gets crazy. And it's typically the big games. Okay. John Mateer is not very highly rated against the rush. He's just not. You go through PFF, all that good stuff. That's where all his mistakes come from. That's where pretty much the only downfall in his game. So I'm trying to figure out in my head and play it out in my head how Michigan is going to address John Mateer because there's a good chance you only rush one or two guys and he slips out of the pocket and he's running around on you because he can run. Or are you building a wall around him? Are you spying him? Are you bringing the house? I'm just very, very interested to see because, that is going to go hand in hand with whether or not Oklahoma can be at the right down and distance on offense. Are they on schedule? Are you in 3rd and 3 or are you in 3rd and 9? And that's going to require running the football. So and that's what we just talked about being Oklahoma's possible weakness on offense. So, there's a lot intertwined in this game. There really is. There's a lot of different avenues to look, but I'm feeling a strong cover here from Michigan. I think Michigan keeps this thing close, man. I think this is a field goal game. I think Oklahoma's going to win it. I think they can do that at home, but I think you see some chinks in the armor in the Oklahoma offense in this one, and I think it's going to be a little bit more. We saw Oklahoma beat up on a nobody team. I think now you're going to kind of see them go against the big boys, right, in Michigan, and I think it's going to slow them down a bit. But I think the Sooners can get the win here, and it's just a different style of Oklahoma team than what we're accustomed to seeing. I'm still, to sit here and think that Oklahoma is going to win this game 20-17, it just doesn't even sound right because Oklahoma for so many years seemed like we're scoring 40, 50, maybe even 60 points in some games, early in the season, whenever they were in the Big 12. But this is a defensive oriented football team, even with John Mateer on the offensive side. So I think the potential for Oklahoma's through the roof this year, but I need to see that offense perform against a team like Michigan that's got those dudes on the defense. But can't wait to see this one, man. This is going to be an awesome matchup. 7:30 on ABC. Be there or be square. It's the matchup of the week. All right. Let's kind of backtrack in the day. Well, I typically go in chronological order, but who gives a crap? We're men of the people. We want to give the people what they want, and we wanted the big game up front and center. So let's jump over to Oklahoma State at Oregon. And we don't have to spend long on this one, man. I mean, y'all see the spread on the screen. Oklahoma State's going on the road to Autzen. 28.5-point favorites are the Ducks. Over under set at 59, a very high 59. We'll address that over under here in a minute because I've got a play on that. I do believe our betting show is supposed to be tonight, right, Mason?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to jump on that, but this will probably be one of my plays on the betting show. So y'all come join us on Between the Lines tonight. We'll give you our best bets of the week in college football. I'm sure you've heard at this point about the groveling that's went back and forth between Gundy and Lanning, right? At this point, it's crying over spilled milk. I mean, we watched Nick Saban do it first. He was actually the grandfather of this. He was the first one to come out in front of a group of people and complain about somebody spending a bunch of money on a roster, right? He did it about Texas A&M years ago in that booster meeting that he didn't realize he was being recorded. I don't think any of us believe that, but Gundy's talking about how much money that Oregon spent, and he's counting their money, and Lanning's back at him talking about, I'm pretty sure that Oklahoma State's got more money than UT Martin, who they played last week. which he has a point. That whole situation was just silly. But Mike Gundy, I think, just likes to stir the pot. I think is really what this is. He's a hard nosed dude and like a man's man, but homeboy is like a OG troll, like before internet times. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like he still uses the media to troll only. Like,
He's
uh,
been Lane Kiffin before Lane Kiffin was Lane Kiffin.
yes,
You know,
yes,
like
yes,
100% that character.
yeah. He's awesome. He's hilarious. He's a great personality in college football. I love to have him around college football, and it's for moments like this. Look, this just makes this game more interesting, right? And when the coaches get fired up like this, that gets me fired up. So I will be tuning into this one, certainly, even though it is a big spread. All right, beyond all the drama, let's get to the football stuff because that's really what matters. The money thing is silly. Everybody needs to get over it. Don't cry because you ain't got money. T. Boone Pickens was the first dude to ever donate $300 million to a program. It was the largest donation ever. So,
Hmm.
you know, Gundy ain't complaining about that. You know what I'm saying? So, and Oregon actually, if you look back at their history, they didn't have nothing until pretty recently.
Yeah.
So, this is just a silly conversation anyway. Um, but let's get fired up about it. That's great. I love that, but it's just a silly conversation. All right, let's talk about the Oregon Ducks for a minute. We haven't got a chance to talk about them this year. Obviously, this isn't a huge game, but it's the biggest game of the year so far for them. They revamped their offense totally. Bring in Dante Moore. Okay. Evan Stewart out. He hurts his patella, whatever it was, patella tendon, something like that. He's out for the season, for sure. You bring in freshman wide receiver Decorian Moore. I think it's Decorian with an N there.
Hmm.
Um, this guy's supposed to be all world. We'll see. I mean, the freshman, you know, probably going to be inconsistent throughout the year. I doubt he's just going to come out there and just, there's a reason that being out there and getting the reps and coming back year after year, you gain experience. I'm not like sold that this guy is just going to be the go-to all year and Oregon's just set up. But this guy is really talented, and I'm very excited to watch him. I know Oregon fans are, and I do think he's going to be a big help this year. Really a bummer about Evan Stewart, but this is going to be a different looking offense, in my opinion. I'm hearing this is one of the best offensive lines that they've had at Oregon since Lanning's been there. You go in the transfer portal and you get offensive tackle World to come over from Nevada, and apparently that's a huge pickup. We'll see. We'll see how that translates, especially as the schedule picks up and you play some of the bigger and badder defensive lines. We'll see. But on paper, looks really good. Offensive line looks really good. The running back room looks really good for Oregon. I think this team is a run-centric offense this year. That's what I think. I think they're going to be able to grind some people into dust. You've got Noah Whittington, there in the running back room. And, I mean, fans are clamoring for it, Mason. They want Mekhi Hughes. They want to
Hmm.
see him. Now, I heard one Oregon fan call into a show, and he said, our running back room is so good, Mekhi Hughes can't even crack the two deep. And that is a level of optimism that, I mean, I'm just like, they're smoking the good stuff in Oregon for sure. I mean, we already knew
Yeah.
that. Um,
Literally.
and I'm not mad at you, but uh, I ain't even mad at you. But that's not why Mekhi Hughes hasn't played. It sounds to me like it was a disciplinary situation more than likely. And will he be back this week? I don't know. Is it going to be this week? Maybe he's out for 2 games. I don't know. But when he does come back, I feel like this is a really strong wide receiver room. So the offense to me looks very run centric. I think they're going to be able to run on just about anybody they play. So that's great. That's great. And you're giving Dante Moore time to get acclimated with Will Stein, get some starts under his belt, and I suspect that by the end of the season, this should be a very balanced offense. Um, I like the defense. Okay. Um, I like specifically the defensive line and linebacker rooms. I like the Uyunglele, he's at defensive end. You love what he brings to the table. The linebacker core looks awesome. Dan Lanning is a defensive mastermind, so you got that in your back pocket as well. The only thing is, I think the back end is pretty young, right? You go in, you get a couple of transfers. We'll see how those guys they were at the nickelback and the free safety positions. We'll see how they translate. Transfers are sometimes it's a shot in the dark. They feel good about these guys, but we'll see. All the young guys though in the back end of that defense are extremely talented. So, you know, are some of those guys going to step up? I'm pretty much 100% sure that some of those guys are going to step up. But are some of them going to take a little more time to get acclimated? Probably so. So I don't think the depth is just like, there's not a ton of experience depth, I guess is the correct terminology, in the back end of the defense, but it's really good. So I digress. I mean, it's still really, really good and very, very talented. And again, Dan Lanning is a mastermind. He's going to have those guys ready to play ball. Oklahoma State is like the polar opposite of what Oregon is right now. Oklahoma State, again, Gundy is kind of opposite of what he actually like. His persona is actually kind of the opposite of what he does. Okay, you would think that he would be so against the transfer portal by the way he talks, but there's 10 new offensive players from the transfer portal on the two deep on offense, and 10 new players on the two deep on defense. And they're all through the portal, all 20 of those guys. Okay, so you got 20 guys total on the two deep offense defense that you got through the portal. So, with that being said, again, Oklahoma State has got to have one of the oldest teams in college football again, just like they did last year. I remember that was a talking point going into last year. But tons of graduate transfers, tons of senior transfers, and all that good stuff. So there is age, there is reps on the defense and offense, but they're from all over the country, all different schools, little schools, big schools. From Vanderbilt to Ball State. I mean, they're just all over the place. So Mason, I mean, throw a dart and see where it lands. I don't know what to think about this team right this second. To be honest with you, this is going to be a great barometer for where they're at. Here's what I do know: quarterback doesn't have any experience for Oklahoma State. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw two different quarterbacks play in this game. We all know Gundy is quick to pull the trigger. He'll do it in the middle of a game, and then the next game go back to the original starter, and then the game after that go to the second string. I mean, the dude don't care. He ain't worried about making somebody feel uncomfortable. We know that. So we may even see a couple of different quarterbacks in this game. Caleb Hicks is the running back from Oklahoma last year. He's transferred over. As an Oklahoma State fan, you got to hope that he can really step up. But, I mean, this team ran for 3.0 yards per rush against UT Martin last week. Not good. Not good. So I'm struggling to figure out what the identity of this Oklahoma State team is right now. I think we're just going to have to sit back, watch this game to really figure out more. Vegas, they feel like Oregon's got this one in the bag. I don't have any reason to argue that, but I'm going to tell you this, man. I'm leaning the under here because 59 is ridiculous, and I just don't think that Oregon is that offense right now. They were slow to start last year. Remember all the close games that Oregon had last year, and that was with a more experienced quarterback and everything. I don't see Oregon coming out here and scoring 40-something points in this one. I think Oregon wins this game, and I think they win it comfortably, but I think it's more like 35-7 or something like that, Mason. I think they're going to be more than happy to go out there and grind Oklahoma State into a fine dust by the fourth quarter, especially with all the talking that's going on. I know what Lanning loves to do. He would love to grind them into dust, and I think this team's well suited to do it. So, and it would be the safest option with a young quarterback. So I think that's going to be the game plan for Oregon in this one. I think you're going to see that game plan a lot early on in the season, and I think Oregon wins this one comfortably. But I think the under hits with room to spare. I really do. And people keep betting this up. That makes me feel even more confident about it. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, looking at Oklahoma State, I think you made a good point. We don't know what their identity is, and similar to a lot of teams right now, heading into week 2, they're still figuring things out. They don't have an identity. They just found out maybe a little bit about what they have and learned a little bit about themselves. You typically see the biggest jump from week 1 to week 2 with these college football programs. That being said, I don't know. I'm anxious to see what Oklahoma State comes out as, because look, you've got 8 transfers starting on the offensive side of the football alone. 3 of them on the offensive line, 3 of them at receiver. Some of these guys looked pretty good last week, at receiver. But just trying to figure out if they're going to be on the same page as Zane Flores. And then, if they're going to be able to run the football. This is a tough team to run against, going up against Oregon. You've got a new offensive line that hasn't figured it out yet. They haven't gelled yet. I think that spells that's a recipe for disaster, I think, for Oklahoma State. A lot of new players coming in on the offensive side of the football. This isn't exactly a team that you want to figure things out with. Very, very fast defense. They're flying around to the football. I mean, you saw it last week with Oregon. They're playing a much lesser opponent, and yet they're flying around the football like it's the national championship on the defensive side. I thought that was really impressive to see. There's a lot of fire there. There's a lot of energy there, and that defense is looking like. Well, it looks a lot like they did last year, and that's because they really didn't lose a ton. The core of that defense came back. You still got Bryce Betcher there in the middle of the defense. I think Tuioti could have a come out year this year. Mateo Uiagalelei seems like he's on pace to be, probably a first round draft pick, if not, a day 2 guy. They bring Bear Alexander over from USC, former 5-star guy, former Georgia guy, and somebody who could potentially pop, but hasn't quite found himself yet in the college football landscape. But again, with the defense for Oregon, we're seeing what they did last year, where they brought in a lot of transfers on the secondary. Last year, it worked pretty well. They were able to kind of get in, mesh, but all those guys are gone now. Literally none of the transfers they brought in last year outside of Sione are coming back. So how does that look? You got a junior and Brandon Finney starting cornerback, more than likely, and then a couple of transfers coming in, to play with him. I think we saw last year Oregon do this, and it took a few weeks for the secondary to really get going and to find themselves. And once they did, I mean, they were pretty sticky. It was obviously they went undefeated. It was really tough to beat that secondary. But
pretty good
does it
season,
happen?
huh?
Yeah, pretty good season, I think, in the Big Ten. But does it happen in week 2? We'll have to wait and see. I don't think that the secondary is going to be tested as much. I do think, Oklahoma State wants to run the football first. They're going to try to get that going. And then they're going to try to win over the top and play action and things like that if they can. But, going up against an Oregon defensive line and this front 7 running the football is going to be really tough. I just don't have a ton of confidence. And then going to the defensive side for Oklahoma State, not as many transfers starting. There's a lot of transfers on the 2 deep for sure, but I don't know that this is like returning what you had last year isn't necessarily a positive to me. Yeah, you get more experience, which is helpful, but this wasn't a great defense last year. But looking at Oregon, I mean, are they going to be able to push the football down the field with Dante Moore. And, this is his first time starting. I haven't liked what I've seen out of him so far. I mean, there's promise, there's upside and potential. But, with 1 year at UCLA starting as a true freshman, looked pretty lost. He looked like a true freshman for sure. And then last year he got to sit back a little bit and play behind Dylan Gabriel. Maybe that helped him a lot. It certainly looked like week one he was picking up things really well. So excited to see Dante Moore. Is this going to be a coming out party for him here in week two? Looking at Oregon, we've only got 3 games in the regular season that we're going to be breaking down. I can already tell you it's going to be this one, Penn State and Indiana more than likely. And we don't know what Indiana is going to be. But I think that's why we kind of take the opportunity against Oklahoma State to talk about Oregon, knowing that the previews are going to be limited for them this year because their schedule is just so easy. It's laughable, really. But I've got Oregon winning this game. I don't think it's particularly close. 28.5 is a lot. I don't know if they're going to cover that necessarily. But at 28.5, you could realistically win this game 37-10, feel like it's never close, and not cover. And that could very well be the case here. Oklahoma State scores, with the 2s and 3s in for Oregon, something like that, and you end up not covering. But I do think that Oregon's going to win this handedly. It's not going to feel particularly close, but there's we'll get a lot of information out of Oregon. This is at least enough of a test where we can start to kind of figure out what their identity is and know how to rank and power rate them moving forward.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this one unfold there at Autzen Stadium. There will be a bunch of screaming Oregon fans there. It won't be long. We'll be talking Oregon and Penn State. Y'all hit the subscribe button. Come and hang out with us. Hit the like button on the video for us. And good luck to the Ducks and the Cowboys. All right, let's jump into this last one, man. We got about 10 minutes to knock this sucker out. And then I got to run, like usual. Kansas at Mizzou. This is an old rivalry renewed. And how old, you may ask? It's pretty old. It used to be called the Border War. And both of these teams were in the Big 12. And this was a huge rivalry back in that day. But these teams haven't played since 2012. So when I say renewed, I mean, it's been a long time, man. I'm really, really excited for this one. And the junk talk is already going on in the comment sections. I've been seeing all kinds of crap talking between the Missouri and Kansas fans. So even though it's been since 2012 since they've met, the hatred is still there, like it was just kindled yesterday. Bo Prabula takes over. Looked really good week one. There was a couple of unfortunate injuries there in week one. Obviously, Sam Horn. But beyond that, Mizzou loses their kicker, right? So that, I guess, maybe right before the game or during the game or something, but lost their kicker. So they had to let somebody else kick, and he only kicked extra points the rest of the game. So I always say that that's a big deal in a game like this. Whenever you're talking about a 6.5 point spread and your kicker goes out, and now you don't have the option to get 3 and you're going for 7s, or going for 6. I mean, it's I don't know. That's a little bit scary of a thought. But as I continue looking at this offense for Missouri in particular, Mason, I really like what I see, man. Ahmad Hardy, I think, is going to be a dude at the running back position. I'm not like overly enthralled about the offensive line. Like, I'm not just thinking this is the best offensive line in the SEC, but I am. They're not chopped liver. I think they're going to be pretty solid. It's all going to depend on Bo Prabula and has he developed? Has he gotten himself mentally ready for being a starting quarterback at Missouri? It's one thing to get thrusted into the action, right? Your adrenaline's going. You're not having to think about it all week. But I'm just, you always wonder how are these guys going to handle going through the week as the starting quarterback with that responsibility. Does he have a bunch of nerves built up? We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'm sure he probably will be nervous, but gamers will be able to play through that. We're going to figure out if Bo Prabula is a gamer. I think he's going to have opportunities because looking at the Kansas defense, they've struggled against the pass, particularly the intermediate 15 to 18-yard passes in the middle of the field. They've struggled with that, guarding that for years now, really, if you look at it. So I think Bo Prabula, with the weapons that he's got on the outside at wide receiver, Marquise, I like those guys being able to have a pretty good, solid day. And I think Prabula is going to be able to toss the ball around. And I'm not overly concerned about Kansas's defense, overpowering this group or anything like that. But one thing that you do have to consider whenever you talk about the Kansas Jayhawks is the man, Jalen Daniels. He's playing out of his mind so far this year, Mason. And now we've seen him do this in years past, and it'd be really inconsistent from week to week. So just knowing his past and having watched Jalen Daniels over the last few years, I have it in the back of my mind that this may just be the day that, he throws 3 interceptions, man. I mean, and that's always possible as a quarterback. Everybody has bad days, but this guy's had a history of having a Heisman-like performance and then following it up with an absolute dookie in his pants. So, with that being said, I think he's really healthy. He's looked amazing. He's among a very short list of the top quarterbacks so far this season in 2025. We'll see if he can keep it going. What I think has really helped Kansas this year, though, is their ability to run the football. They brought in some guys in the backfield, and I think it's just really helped Daniels. But they're running the ball at 6.0 yards per carry. 6.0 yards per carry this season. That's a big help to your quarterback. And beyond that, they're running the ball 58% of the time. So that's a whole different level of balance than what Kansas had last year. And I think that's helped Jalen Daniels a lot. So here's what it's going to come down to. Can they continue that trend? Are they going to be able to run the ball on what I consider to be a really solid Missouri defense? I didn't even really mention them, but I mean, you got some big-time defensive transfers that you bring in between Wilson, Turner, Catalan. All 3 of those guys are really solid, and I think that this Missouri defense is going to provide resistance to Kansas that they haven't seen so far this year, and I don't think that's necessarily a hot take. Beyond all that, these Kansas receivers, they lost their top 7 receivers from last year as well. Emmanuel Henderson, you bring in from Alabama, he's your new wide receiver number 1. He's looked good so far, but who have you played? The Helen Keller Schools for the Blind and Deaf. So I'm just not sold yet. We're going to see. This is the first time Kansas has faced off against an SEC opponent in the regular season since 1988. I'm taking the SEC team in this one personally, Mason. Missouri on an 11-game home winning streak, and at home under this head coach, they're 8-12-1 against the spread in that streak. So, look, I like the home team here. Missouri has really come into their own over the last couple of seasons. I think this team took another step in the right direction. It's all going to depend on Prabula and him being able to come out and perform, but I think he's going to be able to do it against this Kansas Jayhawks defense. What are your thoughts, man? And then we'll get into our predictions here.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this matchup, when I saw what teams or what games we were going to be breaking down this week, this is one that I got really excited for, and I think it's because over 2 weeks of seeing Kansas, I just want to see more. I want to see more Jalen Daniels. Yep. They're a very fun team to watch. I think that they're kind of flying under the radar there in the Big 12. I can't get enough of this offense, and I just want to see more. I want to see more out of Emmanuel Henderson, obviously a highly recruited guy. former 5-star, actually played the running back position, and he sort of transitions over to wide receiver. Um, Anxious to see what he's able to do here, and then the rest of the transfers that came in at the pass catching position there. You mentioned it. Jalen Daniels has been stellar this year, and the run game has certainly helped. You talked about how they were close to 60% running the football, very well balanced. That's a nice number there at 60%. But what that's really done for this offense is set up play action. Jalen Daniels is completing 94% of his passes off of play action. He's got over 300 yards off of play action. So running the football first is absolutely crucial for Kansas to be able to win this football game. So on the flip side, if you're Missouri, you're looking at that and you're saying, hey, we just need to stop the run, really. If we can stop the run, they don't have play action to fall back on. That's where most of their damage is being done right now. So let's go out there, let's stop the run, and put this offense, and put the fire out of this offense, so to speak, be a wet blanket there for the offense here. But looking at Missouri on the other side, I'm just as interested to see Missouri. I mean, Sam Horn goes out. That's never a good sign, but it looks like Bo Perbula is ready for the moment. And I don't think, based off of what we saw in week one, which they weren't playing anybody, I get that, but there were some. I mean, Bo Perbula looks mechanically sound. We knew he could run the football. We saw that at Penn State, running the Wildcat there. Saw a little bit of time where he was able to start for Penn State, but now he takes over as the number one and absolutely shines. So I'm looking at Bo Perbula as potentially being, by the end of the season, one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Just got to see more of it. And that's why I'm so interested in this game. And I'd argue to say that I'm more interested in watching this game than any other this week, because there's a lot of unknowns with these two teams. And really, when you look at Missouri, you look at their schedule, it's pretty favorable. And now they've got Alabama on their schedule. Alabama looks very beatable for a Missouri team right now. So if they're able to beat Alabama, this is a team that could realistically go 9-3, 10-2 potentially. This is potentially a playoff team, and beating Kansas would absolutely be a step in the right direction there for Mizzou. And Kansas, on the flip side, I mentioned at the beginning of the breakdown, this is a team very much in the hunt for the Big 12, so they could also be a playoff team. This is potentially a top 25 matchup when it's all said and done by the end of the season, but we're getting a glimpse at in week two as to what these two teams can be. I like Missouri here in this game. I like them playing at home. I think it's closer than what Vegas has at 6.5. I think this is going to be really similar to the what was it called? The Sunflower Bowl, the Missouri versus Kansas State. I think it
Sunflower
was,
Showdown, baby.
yeah. So I think it's going to be similar to that. We had the thicker kicker come in and kick like a 63-yarder to win the game. I think you see something similar to that. Maybe this new kicker that they have gets his opportunity in the biggest moment and comes through with a 40-yarder, 50-yarder, something like that. I would take Kansas and the points here, but I think Missouri wins it outright. Not even studying the over/under, to be honest with you. I think there's a chance both of these offenses pop, and it's a 30-33 game. And I could also see the defenses kind of stepping up, and in particular, a new quarterback in Bo Perbula. Maybe he was kind of a flash in the pan, something like that. But and then them not scoring a ton of points and it being a little bit lower scoring. But I would stay away from the over/under until we have a little bit more data to go on for these teams. But I feel pretty comfortable in picking Missouri to win it outright.
I agree with you 100%. I've got it written down right here. I'm predicting Missouri to win this one 27-24. For those of you counting at home, that's a 51-point total. It seems like Vegas is right on with this total, so I agree. I wouldn't mess with it. But I also feel pretty comfortable with Kansas covering here. I think that 3 points is is how this game's going to be decided either way. I don't see either team running away with this one and hiding. I think a runaway would be Missouri going and winning this one by 7 or 10. That would surprise me, honestly. I think the most reasonable outcome is a close, well contested game. I think we're in for a good one, but I like the Missouri Tigers at home, and I think the SEC's got some big wins coming up this weekend, man. And I think the SEC fans will be beating their chest after this one. Tigers beating up on the Jayhawks. All right, guys, that is our 4 big matchups of week 2. I got to get out of here, but look, some of these secondary games are pretty good, y'all. I mean, I'm not joking. I wrote some of these things down, and we're going to revisit these at least some of these on the betting show. But if you guys want to talk about some of these later when we go live, please feel free to join us. Throw it in the live chat. Ole Miss at Kentucky going on this weekend. South Florida looked really good against Boise State. They're going down to the swamp to face the Florida Gators. Arizona State at Mississippi State. More cowbell, please. Vanderbilt at Virginia Tech. I think that game is interesting. I want to see what Vandy can do against what I thought was a pretty decent defense for Virginia Tech. UCLA at UNLV. You can throw that on the back burner. Probably come on late. You can fall asleep to that one. James Madison at Louisville. James Madison has put a bunch of money into that program, man. They're not scared to go on the road and face a team like Louisville. That's going to be an interesting matchup. Illinois at Duke. Illinois is looking pretty good. Luke Altmaier, seems like he's been there for a while. Kind of a sleeper team in the Big Ten. They're going to upset somebody's season. Duke, coming off of a good season last year. What are they going to look like? That one's going down at noon. Guys, there's tons of good football. There's literally not a window that you can miss this Saturday. We're here to soak it all up with you. We'll be here to react to it on Sunday as well. Really, really looking forward to it. Maybe even Saturday night this week. We'll talk more about that. But before all that, we've got Between the Lines coming up later today. We'll see y'all here on the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. We'll see you next time. Y'all hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you.